Welcome everybody to the Measure Mobile webinar that we have for today. Just wait a moment or two just to allow one or two others to join. Right, I think we'll get started now. So as I mentioned earlier, if you heard, this is the first of the webinars or video recordings that we're doing in respect of Measure Mobile. And this first one, the whole purpose of this first one really is to just look at some project settings, just some of the basic setup settings that a person would need to consider when they're first getting into using Measure Mobile. So depending on your level of use of Measure Mobile already, some of this may be not news to you, but we're going to look at it from the perspective of someone who really is just fresh to the program. So when you first download, in fact, before I discuss that, I would just like to mention initially that up here at the top, we see we've got three tabs: Project, Account, and Help. Now, if you're following along on a device, either Apple or Android, you're not going to see those tabs because this is peculiar to Windows version, and so just ignore those. Now, initially, when you come to the screen, you're going to have the opportunity, as it tells us in the middle here, because we've got no projects up, no project tiles here, that we can create from template. Now, if we hit this, we get this particular window, and we can enter in customer information, title for the project, and other basic address information. Then you'll notice that we have here that the project is based on template Measure Mobile. Now, in this case, this particular template called Measure Mobile has been set up I've just been alerted to the fact that the screen has not been sharing, so hopefully it's sharing now. And so, starting back from the beginning, these three tabs up here, the tabs that I referred to, Project, Account, and Help, they are specific to this Windows Measure version. And so you're not going to see those on a device. When first coming into Measure Mobile, you have this opportunity to select the Create from Template tab. And when you do so, you get this box coming up here where you put in the basic information for your project. Here, as I mentioned, is the option to base the project on a template. In this case, there's only one template here, although there could be multiple templates if you so wished. These templates are set up in RFMS Online Services, which is the cloud site that everybody who has a Measure Mobile license has access to. So I set this one up and just one. If there were multiple templates, they'd be listed here below with their own radio button, and you could select the one you want. For the most part, most of the people who use Measure Mobile, they just use one template. These templates can be set up with various products attached to them. and those products also are set up in RFMS Online Services and then linked to the template. We don't recommend that users set up huge numbers of products there in the cloud, maybe just the best sellers and some generic products, a few carpets, a few vinyls, etc. Just purely for estimating purposes. You may or may not choose to have price information. That can be added later on in the project, of course. I mean, if you want to have a lot of products in there and link those two, well, that's up to you. You can do that. So having selected the template it's going to be based on, then you have the option of starting the project either in drawing or in the worksheet. Now, most people are going to start from drawing because they're going to be doing a measure. But there could be a situation where you might want to start from the worksheet. For example, if someone comes into the store and they want a price on a certain amount of carpet, some other product, you can just dive straight into the worksheet, crunch those numbers for them and provide a proposal without having to reference any drawing. At this point, I'm just going to close this down and demonstrate the fact that you can get to the same place from the blue plus icon. Now, this blue plus icon appears throughout the use of Measure Mobile, and it's the go-to place for quite a bit of activity. And if I select that, we get that same window come up. Now, what I'm going to do is just set up a project quickly. A bit of information in there. We've got our template selected. We're going to start the project from drawing, and now we're going to add the project. Now, I'm really only doing this to get into this section because we're not going to dive into the drawing aspects of Measure Mobile. We're going to look at that next week. Once we get in here, we're able to have a look at these various icons down the left-hand side, and we'll just spend a few moments looking at those. To have a bit of an idea of what these icons refer to, if we come up to these three horizontal lines and we click on them, it opens up a window and we have a bit of a brief explanation of what these various icons relate to. So obviously we're in the drawing screen at the moment, and that's the one that's in blue. And as we move down this section of icons here, if we click on each one of them, then that turns blue, showing it's the active one. So we've got drawing, we've got products. So we can set up, as I say, those products in the cloud that can we can draw through from the template we're using into the projects. We also have the ability to set up products on the fly per job. However, those will not last. They won't stay with the program. They need to be set up in the cloud for that to happen, but they'll stay with the project that you particularly add them to. Next, we have the checklist. Now, checklist is something else that's set up in RFMS Online Services, and once again, they are attached to a particular template. The checklists are very useful to explain how they work. They are able to facilitate bringing in products and services that are auxiliary to the main product that's being sold. Say it's a carpet that's being sold. Well, in the checklist, you wouldn't have that product, but you would have auxiliary products, maybe underlay, smooth edge, installation. You could have in there furniture removal, travel, etc. And so when you open up the checklist in the project, you can quickly go down, select the items in the checklist that are applicable to the job you're on, and add those. So very useful. You can also use checklists to set up lists that don't relate to products or services as such. For example, you could set up a health and safety checklist to help you tick off things that you require by regulation. Or you could set up one relating to insurance work, questions that need to be answered for your insurer. It'll all be there. And what's helpful about that, of course, is that it stops you from forgetting things. So very useful. Coming down to the next icon, the worksheet. This is really the calculator of the program, where everything is calculated. So while you're drawing and while you're adding product, and if you've got pricing associated with it, of course, and behind the scenes, all the math is being done, and you can go into here and then edit that if you wish, make adjustments. You can turn your calculation to a fixed price, etc. So that's where the worksheet is. These next two are the documents of the program, the proposal document for the customer and the installation document for the installer. Now I'll just go into this briefly just to highlight the fact that there are a few settings in here that we can adjust. First of all, you'll notice down the side that by ticking or unticking these boxes, we can hide or show lines on the proposal. Now, there's no figures in here, but we can adjust this to suit the customer. You'll notice down the bottom here, terms and conditions can be added. Now, there aren't any because this is fresh. So I just loaded this up so that you would see what you would see when you first start using Measure Mobile. Terms and conditions are another thing that's set up in RFMS Online Services in the cloud. And in that cloud site, you can put in your company information, and you can have multiple terms and conditions actually set up there. And if you had multiple terms and conditions, there'd be the options of which one you wanted to select. It could be a particular type of work has a separate terms and conditions from another particular sort of customer. And then, of course, they would be this box would be populated with whatever you chose. Something else you can do, if you select any of these fields, you get the opportunity to, let's go back here. Okay, well, I might just pick this installation document as an example of this. By selecting, we're able to adjust the font. Now, there's not a huge range, there's 3 options actually. But you can adjust the font and the font size, and whether it's bold or in italics. So just a few settings that you can adjust within those documents. Down here, it's the, we'll go back to the drawing screen for that grid. On this little tab, we've got information. So we've got project, customer, job, and company, and you'll see some of that information has flowed through into here that we entered earlier. If you've got pricing in, that's where it's going to appear. The status of the project, whether it's draft or whether it's something that's been finalized. This is when it was created, and we can track modifications that are made to the project. You enter a date in here for a measure, estimated delivery date of the service, and so forth. So this information can be added. In the customer tab, we have the same information that we put in thus far. If we added something here, and we go into the job tab, we have the option of pulling all that information through if you want to do that into the job. And then we've got our company information. Now, if our company information was set up in RFMS Online Services in the cloud, in the company box there, you could have all your company information, including terms and conditions, etc., would appear there. Now, the area that we would spend the most time on is looking at the next icon, the cog, which is really the main settings for Measure Mobile. And to access this settings site, you have to come in and have having set up a project, which is why we've done this. So we've got a project, even though we've got no rooms drawn. And once you're in here, then you get access to this settings menu. So when you first download the product, because by nature it's an imperial product, it's the biggest audiences in the United States, by default it comes with imperial settings, but we have the options of, at this point in time, meters and centimeters. I believe that millimeters is also in the pipeline. For the sake of this demonstration, we've just got that set to meters. The snapping amount, as many of you will already be familiar, it's the increment by which you can move things around on the drawing screen. And there are a number of options here, depending on what you like, your drawing style. I'm comfortable having it at 0.02. Extends through doorways, the next setting. This relates to whether or not we want to have any material flapping through a transition or a doorway. So if it was a carpet or a vinyl, we could choose to have material flapping through to allow the installers to have material to work with for seams. So as most of the walls in this part of the world are about 4 inches thick or 100 millimeters, in this case we've got it set to 0.1 of a meter, material extending through doorways. Moving down to minimum cut width, well, how long is a piece of string? This is really up to you as to what you want, the minimum width that you want measure to be able to produce. This is set to 0.08 of a meter or 80 millimeters. That's entirely up to you. Now we've got some toggles. First one relating to pattern repeat at start of roll. If you wish to do that, you would select it. Cut gap at end of roll. This is the margin that's allowed around a cut. Majority of fills at end of roll, that's another option. And you'll see that show grid is selected. So that's why we're able to see this grid on the drawing screen. If that was unselected, then this would just be blank here. I mean, it's not necessary, but a lot of people like drawing with that grid background. And if you have it selected, of course, you need to select pattern of the grid. So this one is set to 2 meters, the major grid unit, which is basically the dark grey box. And the minor grid unit is each one of those smaller ones set inside, which is set at 0.5 of a meter. And what you have that set to is entirely up to you. It has no real material effect on drawing. We have the show default walls selected, which means that when we put in a room, we allow for a wall around it, which is quite useful when it comes to manipulating rooms, moving things around, rather than having a gap. I mean, you can choose to do that if you wish, but this helps with lining things up. And if you have that selected, of course, then you have an option to choose what color you want for that default wall. It comes by default in a grey, but you can choose whatever color you want there, of course. Then we have the wall thickness. As we mentioned earlier, most walls in this part of the world are 0.1 of a meter, approximately. So we've got that default wall thickness set to that, but that doesn't stop you coming in here on an ad hoc basis and changing it. So if you have a project where the wall is 150 millimeters, well, you can come in there and make that change for that project. We can select default wall height. And now we have the option to select either letters or numbers for cut labels. And those of you who already have experience using Measure will know that we recommend that this be changed to letters. That means that on cuts, they'll be, the cut labels will be displayed as something like 3.A, 3.B, 3.C, etc., as opposed to 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, which does introduce the the possibility that somebody might misinterpret those labels as measurements, which would probably be disastrous. So it's a good move to have that set to letters. Roll width, we have the option of usable or display. We've got that set on usable. Cut increment. So what is the cut increment? Well, that really is a rounding option. So if you have a cut that's 1.75 meters and we have a cut increment set to 0.1 of a meter, it's going to round that cut up to 1.8 meters. So it just cuts down on the decimal places that appear, and most people are pretty happy to have that rounding. So that 0.1 of a meter is fairly common. Maximum cut group length, that's up to you. We've got this one set on 60 for the sake of this, of what we're doing. At this point, we have the opportunity of selecting the location that we're operating from. So for those of us who are in this webinar today, it's going to be Australia or New Zealand. And in this case, it's New Zealand where we are. We've got a 15% GST rate set in there. And we can choose to have either the GST inclusive or exclusive. Now, some of you may be using RFMS as well as measure. We're not really covering that aspect of the integration here today. We're just looking at measure as a standalone. The next option down below is room transparency, where we can go from none down to see through 100%. I operate around 30%. So having gone through those settings and you're happy with them, you hit save, of course. And before going on with your project, I would recommend that you go back into those settings and just see that they have stuck. Every now and again, they don't. So just double check that, and then you're ready to carry on. Now, really the last thing that we wanted to draw everybody's attention to today was the last little icon at the bottom here, which very aptly is being portrayed as a lifesaver. Now, if you click on this, you're taken to the RFMS website, support.measureflooring.com. And I'd recommend that if you haven't done so, that you have a look in there, because not only does it take you to the measureflooring.com website, the support section, it takes you right into the area that deals with Measure Mobile. So you'll be able to access short articles with screenshots that show you how to do things, and short videos that are normally only about 2 to 3 minutes long at the most on various subjects broken down into sections. So it's very easy to follow and really does help, or will help you if you are wanting to upskill yourself in using Measure Mobile. Well, that's everything that we're going to look at today. Thank you very much for attending. There will be a recording available in the next day or so on our website. And we look forward to your attendance next week, where Caden is going to address the use of the drawing tools within Measure Mobile. They're obviously a lot of a deeper subject, much that can be done, and many options or ways of doing things within the drawing tools section. If you have any questions that relate just to some of these setting issues that we've considered, please send those through. I'll give you a few moments to do that. We'll probably address them individually after the webinar. We'll contact you with the answers for those and find that's been an easy way of doing things. But in the meantime, thank you very much for attending, and we'll talk to you again soon.